Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jenna, your host. Today we are going to do another one of our folklore episodes, some in our series of folklore and different things, different spooky season related stuff. So today we're going to discuss gargoyles. What are they? What is their purpose? Where did they come from? Have you ever seen those? They are typically seen on very old architecture, things like cathedrals, castles, things like that. They're things that were there for a reason. So what were the reasons? Why did they have these spooky, crazy creatures on top of these buildings? What were they there to do? Well, their primary reason for being on these buildings was to actually ward the building for protection. So things like cathedrals or churches, right? They wanted to scare away the negative spirits so that as you entered, it's almost like you were entering through kind of a protective force field. And so these gargoyles, while they were very spooky looking, they had an actual purpose. So when we look at gargoyles, they tend to conjure images of hideous, brooding creatures perched high above the cities and villages of the world. The most terrifying ones look as though they might break from their stone moorings and take flight. But these decorative demons are full of surprises. So they had a very specific functional purpose, and that's what makes a gargoyle different from being just grotesque. So gargoyles are there for a reason. They had specific purposes. When gargoyles began appearing on churches throughout Europe in the 13th century, they served as decorative water spouts. A water spout? Why would they need that? Think of modern day gutters, okay? So when rain or moisture would hit the tops of these buildings, they had to have a way to drain it off, right? So it didn't ruin the building. So that was one of their first initial intended purposes, was a water spout to get rid of water or to create drainage. They were engineered to preserve stone walls by diverting the flow of rainwater outward from rooftops. This function, technically speaking, distinguishes gargoyles from purely decorative stone ornaments like grotesques and bosses, although these days the term encompasses all sorts of creature carvings. The name comes from a dragon slaying legend. Ooh, we got some mysticism going on. The word gargoyle derives from the French gargouille, meaning throat. This would appear to take its inspiration from the sculpture's water siphoning gullets, but in fact, the name comes from the French legend of La Gargouille, a fearsome dragon that terrorized the inhabitants of the city of Rouen. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Apologies if you are of French descent and you know that I am. According to the history, the dragon swallowed up ships and flooded the town until the 7th century CE, when Saint Romain, the bishop of Rouen, vanquished the beast, the dragon. Romanius tamed the dragon by making the sign of the cross and then led it into town where it was burned at the stake. The creature's head, however, wouldn't burn, so the townspeople cut it off and affixed it to their church. The gargouille's head became a symbol against evil and a warning to other dragons. Isn't that interesting? I love some of these unwell-known aspects that I'm doing research on and digging through for these podcasts. I love learning. It's so much fun. So gargoyles were meant to inspire fear in the churchgoers. Ooh, that couldn't be a first, right? Okay. So placing gargoyles on a church's exterior reinforced the idea that evil dwelled outside the church, right? Just as I was saying, it was almost like you walked through an energetic force field of protection, right? It was a warding to keep away the evil spirits. So while salvation could be found within, the outside was said to, be full of evil. So how better to enforce church attendance and docility than providing a daily reminder of the horrors to come? So I feel like, a lot of mind control going on in some of these aspects way back when, and sometimes still to modern day. So church leaders hoped gargoyles would also attract pagans, right? Because before Christianity was a thing, paganism, especially in European countries, was the norm. It was one of the main religion or spiritual practices that was around at that time. I have a hiccup trying to come up. Churches would also model gargoyles after the creatures worshipped by pagan tribes, thinking that this would make their houses of worship appear more welcoming to them. It was a bit of a clever marketing scheme that seemed to work. And let's see. And so some of these things were written about in different books, lots and lots of different books on the subject of gargoyles, which was kind of fascinating to me. So one of them is called, let's see, American Gargoyles Spirit in Stone, and that is written by Darlene True Christ. She is a scholar, one of the resources that I found. The gargoyle concept dates back to antiquity or earlier, so they date back quite some time. Although the name gargoyle is just a few centuries old, the practice of crafting decorative animal-themed drain spouts reaches back several millennia. Now that's something I did not know. I didn't know that that was their original intention or purpose, was that they were supposed to be like a gutter system or a drainage system to keep the stone from basically melting away. Because if you've ever seen stone that is perpetually hit by water, it erodes it, right? It ruins it. And so these gorgeous, beautiful cathedrals and churches that were built by stonemasons way back when, with all the craftsmanship and the beauty, you would want to protect that. That should be something that stands for many, many years. And we see that as a result, they are still standing in some places in their glory, in their beauty, because they knew how to treat the stuff to keep it from falling apart. So let's see. People in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome designed spouts in the shapes of lions. Interesting. At the Neolithic site of Göbekli Tepe, I'm definitely not saying that right, in southeastern Turkey, archaeologists found several upright monoliths carved with images of animals that may have once supported a roof. A crocodile-like figure on one of the monoliths may have directed rainwater away from the building. So it's interesting as well that they weren't just one type of creature. They weren't all dragons, they weren't all crocodiles, they weren't all lions. They were all different types of animals or creatures in order to kind of facilitate what was important to the area of where these things were erected or put in place. So one of the more famous ones, and you can look up some pictures, I am going to try and include some photographs that I've found that I like at the end of the podcast, so check those out. But Notre Dame, the famous cathedral, right? And we know that it had a fire several years ago. It was under construction, and the spire at the top, if I'm not mistaken, had some major damage to it. It was under construction, something happened, it caught fire. Really, really horrible. So they have been actively trying to repair and restore it. Of course, then they had to deal with the smoke damage and things like that to the building. So long story short, there are some gargoyles on Notre Dame. So I'm going to attach some photos of that as well. So Notre Dame's famous gargoyles are fairly recent creations. Interesting. The world's most famous gargoyles, and the ones that most influenced the popular wings and horns images of the creatures, are found on Paris's Notre Dame Cathedral. Though the Gothic cathedral was constructed in the 12th and 13th centuries, the gargoyles were part of an extensive restoration project in the mid-1800s, conceived by architectural Eugene Vollet-Ledoux and sculptor Victor Prinet. The 19th century gargoyles have little in common with their medieval descendants, and scholars contend that were intended to represent the time period rather than to mimic it. So basically the long and the short of that is that at the time that they were erected on there, it was for a purpose, right? It was for protection, it was for drainage, but it was also decorative in nature. They had artists that were creating these entities or these sculptures, these statues. So Notre Dame's devastating fire in 2019 destroyed many of Vollet-Ledoux's gargoyles, but artisans have been working to recreate the beloved ghouls from photographs. The restored sculptures are an important part of Notre Dame's overall restoration and rainwater drainage system. So, again, as I was saying earlier, the fire decimated a lot of the upper half of the building itself. And so the things that were original to the building got damaged in certain areas. So they've had to recreate these things. I did come across some video of, I want to say it was like stonemasons that were literally hand chiseling or hand carving stones to put back up there. And then there were other ones that were literally hand carving some of these gargoyles. So really, really cool that people still do those things. It wasn't made with machines. It wasn't made with modern technology. It was literally a hammer and a chisel that created almost all of that whole beautiful building. So I thought that was really interesting. So Pittsburgh is home to a surprising number of gargoyles. Did you know that? I didn't know that. In the 19th century, the Steel City embraced the Gothic architectural revival that swept across America. Many of its Gothic churches, government buildings, and other edifices remained, along with their iconic gargoyles. The city's structure features more than 20 authentic gargoyles and hundreds of grotesques. Many of them are featured in the city's Downtown Dragons tour, created by the Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation. That's something I didn't know. That would be really cool to go take that tour and go see all the different gargoyles and architecture. Some gargoyles resemble actual people rather than mythological creatures. Interesting. Would you want your head to become a statue? Would you want to be, out in the world like that for however long it happens to stand? In Cologne Cathedral in Germany, it features a gargoyle fashioned after the church's longest serving council member, while the Lyon Cathedral in France boasts a gargoyle modeled after the building's renovation construction manager, Ahmed Benzazine. Because nothing says mercy like hideous stone creatures carved in your likeness. So nothing says thank you like a hideous stone creature carved in your likeness. I don't know how I would feel about that if that was me. If that was like, yeah, my face is meant to scare people away. I'm sure it does in some regard, but I think that would be a strange one for your loved ones left behind. Oh yeah, well, her face is now gargoyle and she's meant to scare the evil away. Strange things we come across, right? So a French cathedral swapped its gargoyles for gremlins. Interesting. During the restoration of Chapel of Bethlehem in Saint Jean de Boisseau, I know I'm saying that wrong, apologies, in the early 90s, sculptor Jean-Louis Bostel decided to replace the building's crumbling gargoyles with a few pop-up culture icons. Interesting. This included Gizmo and a gremlin from the movie Gremlins, 1984, an alien xenomorph, and a robot from the popular anime UFO Robert Grendelsler. Many locals were put off by the Bostel's creations, which are technically grotesques, but enough young movie fans got behind the Geek Chapel idea to get it approved. So this one exists in in France, a cathedral in France. I will look these pictures up and I will attach them at the end of this because I want to see that for myself. So Gremlins, from the TV or the movie Gremlins that we saw in the 80s. I loved that movie. I thought Gizmo was so cute. And then so the thing with Gizmo was you couldn't feed him after midnight. He couldn't be around bright light, and you couldn't get him wet. Or if you did, then the gremlins, the worst ones, would come out of him like little fur balls, and then they'd grow, and they were naughty little things. They would break stuff and hurt people and all that. So interesting that that's on a cathedral somewhere. So there's a Darth Vader gargoyle in Washington, D.C. Did you know that? I didn't either, but we have pictures, so I'm going to attach these at the end so you can see. Interesting. All right, in the 1980s, the Washington National Cathedral held a contest for kids to design its newest gargoyle. Okay, that makes sense. Coming on the heels of the Star Wars trilogy, someone posted a Darth Vader gargoyle. The cathedral, which has already, had already installed some off-the-wall gargoyles and grotesques during its extensive restoration work, named 13-year-old Christopher Rader's design as one of its winners, and in 1986 put Lord Vader high up on the cathedral's dark side north wall. It can be difficult to spot, but the cathedral offers its handy guide. So that's pretty cool. I think that's really interesting how many places and all the different types of gargoyles or grotesques that are out there. So let's distinguish between the gargoyle versus the grotesque. So in architecture, a grotesque is a fantastic or mythical figure carved from stone and fixed to the walls or the roof of a building. A chimera is a type of grotesque depicting a mythical combination of multiple animals, sometimes including humans, and a grotesque is often called gargoyles, although the term gargoyle refers to figures carved specifically to drain water away from the sides of a building. In the Middle Ages, the term babuin was used to refer to both gargoyles and chimera. This word is derived from the Italian word babuino, which means baboon. Grotesque often depict whimsical, mythical creatures in dramatic or humorous ways. They have historically been a key element of architecture in many periods, including the Renaissance and the medieval periods, and have stylistically developed in conjunction with these times. Although grotesques typically depict a wide range of subjects, they are often hybrids of different mythical human and animalistic features. Many scholars describe grotesques as being used to ward off evil and as reminders of the separation of the earth and the divine. Grotesques are predominantly carved into buildings of religious significance, in particular churches and cathedrals. Despite their presence in religious spaces, their anthropomorphic designs are largely not directly religious and instead are often more whimsical without religious connotations. They commonly exist on high ledges and rooftops and are frequently positioned out of view from common areas. Prominent examples of preserved grotesques exist on buildings such as the Florence Cathedral and Notre Dame de Paris. Historically, grotesques have also had significant design influence from sculptural trends, and often their architects were originally sculptors or artists. This meant that the widespread emergence of grotesques also often converged with popular art styles that existed at the time, especially the combined rise of the Gothic style and the addition of grotesques in architecture. Key architects that often included grotesques as features in their designs include Brunelleschi and Gundolf of Rochester. Let's see, what else do we want to include? Some critics, such as Francis Barash, dismissed the use of grotesques as an idle toy and not of any great use. They also argued that it perpetuated superstition instead of articulating what is real or the truth, right? We always need some truth in life. So this means that the use of grotesques is also changing in architecture. Aside from the sculpture, for instance, the term has been used to describe the search for the abnormal or the representation of caricature. Caricature? Yeah, okay. There are also scholars who use the architectural definition of grotesque as a term for disharmony. So this could be more destructive than improvements. All right, so I feel like there is a lot of these that, and I'm looking at photos as I'm scrolling through here. There's so many different types of them, so I'm going to include as many photos as I possibly can so you guys can see all the different types. I find it fascinating. Some of them are really absolutely bizarre looking, and you know, if you saw that in a dark space in the nighttime, I think it would absolutely frighten you. I think it would be something that's like, I don't want to be right here. That's like, they're very unnerving. There's also a new movie that's coming out that has gargoyles in it, so I wanted to mention that too. It's a new Dracula movie, but this one is about a love story between Dracula and her name was Mina, so she was the love of his life. And the premise behind the movie is that she was the love of his life and he fought tooth and nail to be with her, and that she was literally like killed in a battle. And so before he was immortal and he served God, and that he fought for God's army and all these things, and as a result, since he felt that God had taken his love away from him, he vowed that he would never again work for God, and that he waited and waited and waited 400 years for her to reincarnate. Now, I can't remember exactly if the gargoyles were actually human once upon a time and that they were under some sort of like spell that changed them into a gargoyle. I think that's the premise behind that part of the movie, but it doesn't have a happy ending. So if you're able to see that, and it's not available in America, I had to really search for it, but I've been seeing clips of this for days and days now, so I watched some different little trailers and things like that. It looks like a fantastic movie. Like, I'm stoked to be able to find it and watch it, but you can find it, I think, on YouTube. You have to search it up. It was done this year, so 2025, so it is out, but it's primarily being shown only in Europe, so a little more difficult to find. But again, I hear that it has not a great ending. I haven't seen it, but I do want to, so interesting. So another key difference between grotesques and gargoyles: grotesques do not have a water spout like gargoyles, but are simply stone carvings or paintings of creatures. They can be used as protection like gargoyles or as decorative artwork. So we learned that gargoyles originated in medieval Europe as functional architectural elements designed to divert rainwater, and their name is derived from a French legend about a dragon. So let me pose this question. Do you think dragons really existed? It's interesting to me that there's so many cultures globally. Chinese culture comes to mind. You know, they have the Chinese zodiac wheel with all these different animals on it. And literally all of them are real animals except for which one? The dragon. So did the dragon really exist? I think personally that it did once upon a time. Maybe it still does. Maybe it's just sleeping and one day it'll wake up. I don't know. But interesting that it comes from a legend about a dragon, right? And that maybe it was a fire-breathing dragon. Maybe it could fly. Maybe it, ate people in town. I don't know. But it's interesting that so many places have some sort of legend or folklore that does have to do with the dragon. So what do you think? Would you be afraid to be surrounded by gargoyles? Do you think that there's more to it than just decorative artwork or channeling rainwater away? Do you think that there was some sort of folklore or legend that actually helped people to see that these were protective in nature from evil? That is what I have for this episode. I hope you enjoy the photos that follow. Again, there is going to be a little clip of the movie that I was discussing, the Dracula movie. It does have gargoyles in it if you're curious. So would you want to be on the podcast? If so, shoot me an email. Remember that I'm open to doing podcasts with other people. The goal is always to share knowledge, and sometimes it's a little fun or out there. Have a great week.